Yeah, g'day guys, Steve here from Dirt Bike ADV. Sunday afternoon, just out in the shed. Come out this morning to work on the old ute, and unfortunately I don't have anywhere that I can work on it undercover. So it's been raining all morning, so that was canned, unfortunately. I've always got tons and tons of things going on, lots of projects going on. That's the way I like to live my life. So I decided, right, I'll come in and I'll load up my AJP. We've got a trip coming up in about 3 weeks' time up into the northwest of Victoria, up into some sandy desert country. And so yeah, I bought the new Reckless 40 for the AJP, just as a bit more of a larger system compared to the Wolfman system. And as you know, if you watch the channel, I recently sold the Endurostand to buy the Reckless 40. So yeah, I've come out here to fit this all up and done a lot of experimentation and actually fine-tuned the fitting of the Wolfman E Base as well, and tried the Wolfman E Base on the AJP. So done a lot of experimenting and loading stuff up in different ways. As I say, wasn't initially that impressed with the Reckless 40. It's not super versatile, it's a little bit limiting. So yeah, I've got my reservations, but I've experimented and found probably the best way that I can load this up. And obviously with the 390, I've had the Wolfman loaded up and I've got that pretty well sorted now. But as I said, I did improve it a little bit. So I'm going to grab the camera and just sort of show you around what the end result is. But also too, I'm just going to drop in a little bit of footage of my initial thoughts and working my way through this. I'll just drop a little bit of footage in of that as well too. But anyway, for now I'm going to grab the camera and I'm going to show you what my results were. Well, I was planning to work on the ute today. Not much of a day for it. Got plans to build a carport in the front of this shed, but haven't got there yet. Got a couple of projects on the go. But today, seeing it so wet, thought I would fit my new Mosko Reckless 40 to the AJP PR7. And so far, not that impressed, to be perfectly honest. It's a bit of an awkward setup, I've got to say. Probably a little bit over-engineered. And a little bit limiting is probably what I'm going to say as well too. Looks good on paper and looks you know, certainly well built and well thought out, but probably a bit over-engineered in my opinion, and a bit overdone. I'll just go through a few things that I've noted so far. So getting these dry sacks in is a bit of a pain in the backside. You've got a cinch strap here which is really good, so you loosen that up, but trying to get those down in there, you sort of have to leave them half empty, which is a bit of a pain in the backside. What I've done with those is sort of left them only 3/4 full. So in that side I've got my sleeping mat, my chair and my pillow, and that's all I could get in that side. I've got a 2 litre bottle under here, sorry, a 1.5 litre bottle under there. That's a brilliant idea how that's attached. Now most people are running these straps over and up to the dry bag, but I've decided to run these straps around the whole unit. And to Mosko Motor's credit, they've got swivels on here which allows me to do that. So that's just a bit of extra support for the bag. So yeah, that only fits the 8 litre, what do they call it? Dry bag up the top there, whatever they call it, only fits a sleeping bag. That's all. That's probably didn't even quite fit in there. A reasonably, what I'd call a winter sleeping bag. That's the other thing I've got in there too, is my thermal reactor, because we've got to winter now, so I'm taking a reasonably light sleeping bag but a thermal reactor, so a liner from a sleeping bag. In this side I've got my cooking gear and a little bit of dry food and a few clothes and my wet weather pants and a buff and a few bits and pieces like that. And again, for the illustration purposes, 1.5 litre of fuel underneath there. So that's basically it. Haven't got my tent on yet, so yeah, it's a little bit awkward to work with this thing. I love these bottle holsters, don't get me wrong, and the theory behind it, I've never been a big fan of you know, twin wall systems where you have the actual carrier and then the lining bags inside. Never been a fan of that. I've sat on the bike. I certainly would like to put maybe another couple of bottle holsters there, but they're going to hit me in the legs, so because these are sort of just coming down where my thighs sit. I do like to sit a long way back on the bike, so yeah. But now, of course, I've got to get my tent on. Now, this is my adventure touring bike, so I want to put my big tent on. So I grabbed my big tent and I put that there. That's sitting out by itself, a bit ugly, isn't it? And here we go. This is the problems that I'm experiencing. Where does the tent go? Where does the normal two-man tent go? I'm seeing guys stuff their tents loosely into these bags, into the dry sacks, and their sleeping bags are the same. But if you've done any hiking at all before, the whole idea of trying to get stuff into a backpack is to roll everything up really tight. And then, you know, obviously with sleeping bags, that's a down bag in a compression sack, all compressed down. Obviously you have to let the downs out before you want to sleep in it, so you've got to fluff it back up again. Same with the tent. The tent's rolled down pretty tight and squashed in, and it's got compression straps on it as well. And so yeah, everything tends to be wrapped up and rolled up really nice and tight. And so obviously if you're stuffing tents in here loose, or the sleeping bags in here loose, you're not really taking advantage of the space. So I certainly prefer to have everything rolled up in its stuff sacks or its compression sacks. And so that does limit me a little bit. So yeah, so then I have the problem of the two-man tent. Where does this go? This unit here sits there good, but that's only a sleeping bag. Do I sit the tent there? Always working on trying to keep the bike as skinny as I can. So I grab my one-man tent, sit that there. It's still hanging out a bit, but I think it's doable. And then my idea is, obviously I've got 3 extra litres of fuel here. I can grab a fuel bladder here and tie that there. I think that should work okay. Now, what I have done was tried to tie the fuel bladder and the tent underneath the beaver tail. That was unsuccessful. That just doesn't work. That beaver tail's pretty limiting, actually, I've got to say. They've got an extension pocket in here, but again, sort of really doesn't work very well. The other option, of course, is I can turn everything the other way, or I can remove this and put a duffel on, that's what I'm sort of thinking I might end up doing. Just a little 30-litre duffel sitting across here might be a better option than this beaver tail. So yeah, I'm going to do a bit of experimenting with that now, and yeah, see how I go. Listen, very well made stuff, and it's sitting there quite good. I've got the advantage with the AJP that there's brackets underneath here, so I'll probably just get some bungees and tie those in like that on both sides, and that'll just stop any flap with the system. And as I say, I love these integrated bottle holsters. They're absolutely fantastic. They've got metal buckles here, and they've got metal buckles down on the down here. So again, that's really good that they've done that, but it's just a little bit of an awkward system to work with. Yeah, very interesting. Very, very interesting. So do I get rid of the beaver tail altogether? It sort of makes a bit more sense to me. I've got a compression sack, a waterproof compression sack for that sleeping bag that'll get it down a whisker smaller. I'll just set the tent behind that, and then if I need a fuel bladder, I set the fuel bladder there. Does that make more sense? It seems to me than the beaver tail. Yeah, it just seems to work a little bit better, doesn't it? Particularly if I pull that sleeping bag down. Sort of have the sleeping bag between these dry bags where they stick up a little bit. And can pull all that down with some rock straps. Probably makes more sense to me, I would say. Yeah. Or do I just get another Wolfman system? I'll get the B Base. This is the E Base off the Sherco, so that fits beautifully on the Sherco. It's a nice skinny system. The B Base is a little bit wider, so the rollie and the bottle holster there would roll over a little bit further. Just put a bladder up the back here. That works well. Obviously I can get my compression sack and pull that sleeping bag down a bit, and when I strap it down there's plenty of loops to tie everything on here. Yeah, and as I say, the B bases are wider in here, so this means all this would roll over further and not be up near my bottom here where it currently is, but this is designed for an enduro system. But yeah, the beauty of the Wolfman system is there's lots of loops to tie stuff off with. So yeah, not to mention the rack, obviously. So yeah, don't know which is better, the Wolfman or the Mosko Moto. the mind boggles. G'day Jasper, bit bored today, are you mate? Been a bit wet and shaggy, hasn't it? So we'll start with the AJP here, the PR7. Obviously this is, as I said, the Mosko Moto Reckless 40, or Reckless 40 as it's called. Sort of think it should be called a Reckless 40, but anyway, they call it the Reckless 40. Make no mistake guys, really good quality stuff, well thought out, probably a little bit over-engineered, probably a little bit thought through too much possibly. Could have probably made the system a little bit simpler. As I mentioned before, I'm not a big fan of dual liners, and so this system of shoving a dry bag inside here is quite awkward to use. This cinch strap is really good, but even when you loosen that off, it's sort of a little bit awkward to get in and out. As I said before as well too, the bottle holsters underneath there, absolutely brilliant, really good product. Really good idea. As I said, I've got these straps. These straps are supposed to go up onto the dry bag here. I've got them wrapped around under there. I reckon they make more sense there, just to offer a little bit more support for the pannier. But that's the best solution I can come up with, guys. So I've got my sleeping bag in here and my tent there. Now, it's not too bad. It's a little bit wobbly, but it's not too bad. I probably can live with that. And obviously, if you know, if I was going for only an overnighter, I might take my one-man tent, which is, if you look here, you know, considerably smaller, and it wouldn't hang out so far. The next thing is just increasing the fuel capacity. So I'm always sort of mucking around with that. So I can chuck a 5 litre up there. You know, that gets me probably with that 5 litre barrier. I've got two 1.5s underneath here at the moment, so that gets me about nearly 500k range at the moment. So I could probably, with that 5 litre bladder, you know, get across the Simpson, for example. Certainly got some really good range. But yeah, it all sits there pretty good. As I say, really good quality gear, don't get me wrong. But yeah, not super versatile. So the problem you have is you have no excess storage anywhere. So we all do it. We go to a service station or we go to a supermarket and we grab a few things for tea, or you know, a few stubbies of a few cold beers, whatever we end up doing. We've got nowhere to put that stuff. When I have a duffel, I typically have a duffel that's a little bit too big. I just undo the duffel, chuck the beers in there, some fresh meat in there, or some, you know, sometimes even things like fresh fruit and that sort of stuff I'll chuck in there, just so when you get to camp you've got some fresh fruit. You get sick of eating all the long life food, so to speak. So there's no contingency, there's no room for anything else here. So if I'm going to buy anything at a service station, it's going to go on my back in the backpack. Not a disaster, but that's where a duffel here is a little bit more flexible. You can just undo the duffel, tuck those things in, and away you go. With this system, I've got no contingency at all, no spare room. So yeah, so that's probably my major issue. These sliding in is very awkward, to say the least. Yeah, and other than that, it's a pretty good system. I'm going to be able to tie. I've just put these on temporarily, but with sort of tying these bands around here, these straps around here, I can tie these off a little bit. I'm not going to use those, but just as a bit of a guide, I thought, yeah, that'd be a good little idea. Some little flexi bungee in there, so I can stop these from flapping, which will be really good. So that's how I think I'm going to set it up. That's got a sleeping bag in it. You know, as I say, a winter sleeping bag. I've got my thermal liner in there as well too. So, you know, this is pretty well it. I'd still be wearing a backpack and having some food and cold beers in the backpack. So yeah, but it's you know, it's okay. It's I probably would prefer a duffel on the back, but yeah, and it's not, you know, super steady. It's a little bit wobbly, so yeah. But anyway, at this stage, I think I'm going to run with the Mosko Moto. I was getting a bit tempted maybe to get the B Base and you know, just set it up with a duffel on the back and a couple of the bigger rollies, but at this stage I think I'm going to run with it. I'm certainly going to think about it overnight, but before I actually use it for the first time, if I'm going to change, I better change now and try and sell this second hand and buy the Wolfman system. And obviously this is the Wolfman system. Now this is the as I explained before, the enduro base, the E-base. So this is a much lighter setup. These are only 6 litres each. I think the Mosko Motos are 14 litres each, you know, so these are 6 litres. These are 2 little water bottles, but obviously this is just an overnighter setup for a bit of lightweight camping. Summer sleeping bag, one-man tent. Generally, I can get my food, cooking gear in one side, and some and a mattress and a pillow in the other side, sort of thing, and maybe a t-shirt or something like that. But this is pretty well lightweight travelling. The other thing is, of course, it sort of works well from a perspective of carrying a bit of extra fuel. When you have your tent like that, you can just strap your fuel bladder straight over the top. So these ADV Works have good molly loops on these, so you can strap those over. So that again gets me probably heading out towards, if I put fuel in these 2 bottles, gets me out towards 500 kilometre range on that bike, so to speak. Now the other thing with this setup is that I haven't got any water here, so and same with the Mosko Moto. So we've still got a little bit of luggage to go on. We've got to get some water bottles going on. So, and obviously if we don't need the range, we just put water bottles in here, and same in the Mosko Moto, we just put water bottles in there. But always sort of thinking about range. So that's my 2 setup, guys. As I said, a little bit apprehensive about the Mosko Moto in some respects. I thought about even removing this, as I said before, and putting a duffel there. In some respects I'd prefer a duffel, but anyway, I'm probably going to run with it at this stage, but watch this space. As I say, we've got a trip coming up in 3 weeks, so you'll see it then. But yeah, a Wolfman compared to a Reckless 80, a Reckless 40 I should say. A very interesting little scenario. Anyway guys, that's enough waffle from me. Thanks for watching, and we'll hope to see you out in the trail soon.